So I think it's the story we both tell ourselves and share with the world about ourselves. I think that's what your narrative is. It's the words you use to encourage yourself, potentially to talk down to yourself or what have you. It's how you frame your experiences and what you tell yourself about them, and also what maybe you tell yourself or tell others about your experiences, right? So it is truly a story in and of itself. That's what narrative means. And your narrative and owning it is about taking responsibility for it. It's about taking responsibility for the things that you are saying to yourself and also the things that you are saying to others. What inspired me to focus on the shaping of your own story or narrative is primarily driven by the fact that I think, especially as women and women of color, we tend to allow others to tell our story. And how that can occur is that we let whatever situations or circumstances that are transpiring, we let other people explain them. You know, there's often this kind of phenomenon. We are taught to keep our heads down, to work hard, often twice as hard, to get half as far, aka that's a 4x multiple there. But we are literally kind of taught to not draw too much attention to ourselves. I think we share this with a lot of, Asian cultures and often Latinx communities. It's just this idea of shrinking ourselves and our experience so that way we don't draw attention to ourselves. And most of that is an intention to assimilate or to blend in and to become a part of the background and not draw too much attention to ourselves. But by doing that, we often then allow others to craft and to narrate and to tell our stories, but they could have it very wrong. And more times than not, they do. And so the reason I felt it was important to remind us that we own our own stories, that we own our own narrative, and ultimately we own the brand that comes from those aspects of those being managed really well, is because I don't want us to ever forget how important those things are. People remember, yes, how you make them feel 100%, but they also remember what they've heard about you. And if all they hear is through the lens of someone who doesn't really know you, who doesn't know your intention, who doesn't know your why you did something a certain way, how you think about something, then ultimately they're the ones writing your story. They're the ones who are going to create opportunities or limit them for you. And so by owning our narratives, by owning our stories, we are able to ensure that at a minimum, it reflects our intention. It reflects the spirit with which we operated, the spirit with which we intended, because we own it. We're the ones getting to take pen to paper or voice the intention behind something and uncover something and ensure that it is known for what it really was, at least to us and from our perspective. If someone wants to own and embrace their own story and kind of combat against comparing themselves to others, I think that starts with really taking the time to know oneself. If there's a starting point, it's like really take the time to understand what makes you tick and why. That can be really difficult in a world that's extremely noisy. It can be very difficult if you grew up in a situation that didn't allow for you to create clarity for yourself, but you were, again, more spoon-fed or provided with a perspective on yourself. And so I think it starts with taking that time. I know that I get a lot of comfort from stability. I get a lot of comfort from understanding how things work and why they work that way, the intention behind the design of things. And I think those things come from like my upbringing. They come from not having a whole lot of stability as a child. They come from feeling like by understanding something deeply, I can take greater command of it and control of it. And so taking the time to understand why something is important to you or comforts you, or why something is triggering to you or makes you less apt to operate at your best, enables you to then own that, to work on it if it needs to be worked on, to celebrate it and bring it to the forefront, leaning into those strengths or understanding those challenges or weaknesses that you might have. But it starts with like really deeply understanding oneself, and then kind of taking that understanding and making intentional choices on then what am I going to do now that I understand myself in that way. I mean, everybody's path is their path. So if you feel compelled or feel comforted by going with the flow, with other people's flow, then I'm not going to stop you. Like, that's 100% for you to decide. But you, as long as you do it with your eyes wide open, I guess is probably the one thing that I would say is do you, boo, but like have your eyes wide open. And if your experience is saying, okay, like this feels good, I don't feel cheated, I feel well compensated, I feel like I'm getting everything out of this that I need from it, then great. But when going with the flow no longer serves you, I think that's when you challenge that. And so like some people may lean into convention, or some people may feel very comfortable not bucking against the system, or what have you, and that's absolutely your prerogative, right? That's your unique journey. It's you on the conventional path, going with a school of fish in that direction. That's all good. You may decide to be Nemo and break off and do your own thing, and you'll have your own version of adventures by doing that, right? You'll have your own lessons, you'll have your own successes, you'll have your own challenges and potential, I'm not gonna call them failures, but things that you will overcome going through like your own path. But it's very much about making sure that you're constantly checking in with yourself. So I think I continue to come back to understanding yourself deeply enough that you can then operate from that understanding. And it may come down to like, hey, that didn't feel good, and it's not something I want to put up with. It's not something I want to maintain, and so therefore I'm gonna not continue to do that. But you have to come back to self, and I think that's the only way for you to like exist in this planet, is like being very centered and being very grounded in self. And I think that's where I think joy and peace reside for each of us. So just understand your motivations, understand your why. And if you understand your why, then the rest of it is kind of like, it doesn't matter if it looks conventional or it doesn't.